Latinx Can, a podcast showcasing Latinx professionals who turn their dreams into realities. I'm your host, la doctora Yanire Flores Delgado, and today I'm here with Dr. Wilmarie Marrero Ortiz, a Puerto Rican scientist whose relentless pursuit of her passion helped her beat the odds. And she's here to tell you, sí se puede, my friend, sí se puede. This is the first of a two-part episode in which Dr. Wilmarie shares with us the endless opportunities she took advantage of and which helped her find her love for science at an early age. We talk about the importance of building a network, especially a Latinx network, where she could see herself represented and find support and inspiration to turn her dreams into reality. Dr. Wilmarie Marrero Ortiz, welcome to Latinx Can.
Thank you so much, Yanire, for having me here.
I am so excited to talk to you today. I know that you have an excellent story and that our listeners are going to be able to take advantage of your experience. So let's start a little bit by talking about where you come from and who you are.
So I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. That's an island in the Caribbean, part of the United States. And I'm the oldest and the only daughter in my family. And basically, from the beginning, my parents always incite me the desire of the learning and the importance of the education. From the beginning, they were really dedicated to me. Like I started doing speech therapy when I was little, and then also like tutoring and etc. just to put me on track. And I really appreciated all their effort and dedication during my time. And one of the things that helped me during my high school years was the research. So I started doing research in high school from a program from NSF called Model Institution for Excellence in the Metropolitan University of Puerto Rico. That program basically consisted on doing research like every Saturday from 8 to 12, and then just a little bit of research, just teaching you the scientific method, how is the process, and then present it at the end of the semester. As a high school student, that was great for me. They also pay you at the end.
Oh, wow.
So that was basically my area that in every semester, I start testing a different area of scientific research. Like I did research in chemistry, environmental science, computer science, physics.
And how old were you when you started this program, and how did you find out about it?
So I was probably 14 years old because it was when I was in 10th grade. And I knew it because my science teacher from biology mentioned it in our class. And I was like, oh, I wanted to try it. Why not? And I applied and I got selected. And ever since then, every semester and summer, I participate in that program.
Oh, wow. That is true commitment to sciences from a very early age.
Yes.
And your parents, you mentioned they were supportive from the very beginning. Did they also have a background in the sciences like you?
No, they do not have a scientific background. My father is HR technician, and my mom she had a undergraduate degree in education, but she performed as a budget analyst for the government in Puerto Rico. But they were the only ones, basically from each of their family, that were able to complete a bachelor's degree. So from that sense, that basically where start their encouragement for us to taking the education seriously.
And what was the message from your parents, knowing that they probably had a different destiny compared to their parents because they were able to get an education?
So basically, they were always trying to showing as a reference, like we were able to have some troubles, to have our own house, etc. And then basically like the economic success relatively speaking, that we have towards some of our family members, that was basically due to their hard work. Like they have their education, they were able to get a good position, and then that was basically like the lead by example. Like if we were able to be that successful, then that was through our education. If you wanted to be the same or better, this is like the starting path that you need to start taking seriously.
And it sounds like you also had teachers who were very focused on providing opportunities to their students. Can you talk a little bit about the role of your teachers in your life and their influence in your life?
I was really good in math, and actually not so much on science, ironically speaking, because sometimes I consider the science to be a little bit more of like memorizing instead of like figuring out.
Yeah.
But then during high school, with my biology teacher, he has so much passion for teaching the biology with all the history. And then I was also in a Catholic school, so he was able to merge all that, the story, the evolution. And then that was kind of like an idea to connect people that probably were distant because of their religion. But then he was really advocate for the scientific fairs. So he was always encouraging people to do scientific fairs or doing those type of research. So in my first semester in 10th grade, I started participating in this research program on Saturday, but then he encouraged me to apply and do the scientific research in the spring semester. And ever since in 10, 11, and 12th grade, I participated in scientific fairs, and he was instrumental on it. And then in 11th grade, when I took chemistry, I was fortunate that the daughter of the director from my school, she was doing the PhD in chemistry at the University of Puerto Rico. So I was doing kind of like my study, and they suggested her that maybe we can do some like fancy analysis in her lab. So what we ended up doing was a lipid profile by using a GCMS. Yeah. And I was just in 10th grade. And at that point, also my cousin was taking OChem.
Organic chemistry, you mean?
Yes, organic chemistry. Yes. And then basically in 11th grade, I knew already that the straight line means like the carbon with the respective hydrogen.
Okay, yeah.
So that was actually like really, when I ended up like loving like the chemistry side, that, this is not so foreign or difficult. And similar in 12th grade. So basically all that, they were really supportive.
I'm very happy to hear that, because it makes such a difference when your teachers they're really invested in the education that they're providing. And in a situation like yours, where some people might feel that there is a complete disconnect between the scientific method and religion, he was able to bridge the gap. And it talks about the role of scientists, really, and what we need to do to become more relatable to the general population, because it might seem, and we see it very often these days, that people have a distrust in scientists, and it really is on us as scientists to become more aware of what the population needs and to shape our message so that it is well received.
Yeah, that's basically the key for the science communication.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned a little earlier two main organizations. You mentioned NSF and ACS. Can you tell us a little bit about what those are?
So the NSF is the National Science Foundation. So basically that's the federal agency that provides most of the funding for the scientific field in terms of research, academic, or even training and industry. ACS is the American Chemical Society, and basically it's the biggest scientific organization. I focus from chemists and chemical engineers. They have a really big commitment in Puerto Rico. We have a couple of like university professors that are really tied to the ACS, and they provide a lot of outreach to expose everybody to the science. And that was actually something that I got knowledge when I was doing the scientific fairs, or even during the my weekend research.
You know, not only in Puerto Rico, they provide a lot of funding and outreach, which is so important to get young kids interested in the sciences early on. But even at the high school level, like you mentioned, the program that you joined when you were in high school, they also offer support for college students, and they provide pretty hefty scholarships that can help a long way in when somebody is interested in studying sciences and chemical related fields, and also thinks that they are going to be pursuing a career in the sciences and especially in chemistry related fields. One of the programs from the ACS that I learned about quite recently, it's a program called ACS Scholars. And what they do is that they provide scholarships, I think at least or up to $5,000 for students who have or are graduating high school or are in years 1 through 4 of their college degree. And it's a scholarship that can be renewed. So anybody out there who has an interest in the sciences and is looking for some financial help can look into the ACA Scholars Program and see if they can apply and solicit a scholarship from them. So we'll leave the information in the show notes so that people can reach it.
They also have the SEEDS program, which is like a paid summer internship for high school students. So they have partnerships with different professors in different universities, and they offer funding for a high school student to start doing research in one of the university labs.
That's excellent, because it's an opportunity that, you know, in other fields, people need to either volunteer and not get paid or even paid to get that experience. And knowing that you can get that experience and also earn a little money makes such a difference, right? So we'll also add that to our show notes. And so, Wilmarie, then you had this exposure to the sciences early on in your career, and from there you decided to apply to follow your college degree at the University of Puerto Rico. What was your undergraduate career like?
I ended up studying, like you say, in the University of Puerto Rico, my bachelor degree in chemistry. And I really loved my time as an undergrad. It was a really different scenario to what I was used to it during my school years. But also just knowing so many people with different background, different mindset, and learning from them. Also, my university was really big in advocating for social problems. So my maturity to understand those social problems and advocate for them and not be an outsider or being on the sideline, but actually participate on it was definitely during my undergraduate years. All my classes were in Spanish, even though the books were in English. So sometimes it was a little bit difficult to connect what the professor was saying in the class to what was in the textbook. So that was something that was a little bit like delaying my progress that I thought in mind, and actually make me to develop more effective study habits, because I didn't have study habits at all. I was just like, oh, this makes sense, so I will always remember. But then trying to make all the connections, connecting all the dots and seeing a broader picture, that was something challenging that I ended up learning.
So what studying habits did you develop during that time?
I was able to be always trying ahead of the schedule, like not necessarily read everything, but at least scroll like the pages to see what's going on, what they are going to discuss. Sometimes some other sections were ahead, or they even have different professors. So then we met together trying to discuss the different styles from the professor, like the different examples, just to make sure that everybody was on the same page. And then don't be afraid also to go to the professor office hours. If I don't understand something, I went to the professor office hours. Some of them also provide like some tutoring or mentoring with additional exercise for study. Or even we have available also like old tests from previous years. So we were able to gather all of them and making that as a practice.
Wow, I commend you for being ahead of schedule whenever you could. I, during my undergraduate career, was always catching up. I never had enough time I usually just showed up in class and be like, okay, I'm ready to learn. And like you said, I at some point I realized that was the way that I was always used to studying. But when I showed up to class and I was just, lagging behind all the time, it was like, oh, wait a minute. You mean that I need to be prepared? Like I need to read before coming to class? That was definitely challenging. So it's great learning early on in your career.
Yeah, and the amount of things that you need to know for a particular test. Like I remember my first test for physics was basically my entire year of high school. So, and I needed to know it in 2 months. So that was basically what makes me like set on, because my first test as an undergrad, it was calculus one, and I did not good at all. But I was like so frustrated. And then the next week I have a chemistry test, and I was like so nervous because knowing that my chemistry was my major, like I could not make this poorly because it's just a general class. So you can imagine what will be the future. The next classes. And then I got a B. So then I'm like, okay, so that means that I can do it. It's just that I need to put a little bit more of effort and commit.
Right. And I think you hit the nail on the head with, I think that's how you say it. I can't remember the saying, but I think you're right on point. And, you said earlier, you were really good at math, but maybe not in the sciences. And people can be afraid of following a career in the sciences because they may think it's too hard. And I've come to understand really that it's not about how smart you are. It's about how much work you want to put in. If somebody's really smart, they are going to get it on the first trial and they don't even have to try any harder. But if you don't get it because you don't think that you're smart, all you have to do is keep trying. And like you said, go to office hours, go ask the professors. The professors are there to help you learn. And so use their time. That's really what you need to do.
Yeah, and then if you have more people, you don't need to also like study on your own. I mean, it's good, but then study with a group that they can give you like different example, different perspective, that then it can make you get that aha moment to understand the concept and remember the concept and apply it in another scenarios.
Absolutely. And so another thing that you did while you were doing your undergrad at the University of Puerto Rico was to continue that research initiative that you had in high school. Tell us a little bit about how you were able to continue that.
Initially, when I start kind of like wanted to think to do more like science, I wanted to become a meteorologist initially before high school. But then in Puerto Rico, we don't have a bachelor's in meteorology. Normally what we have is like a certificate, and then you do your bachelor either in physics or math. Then the summer before I entered to undergrad, participate that this can be also a good high school program. It was called the Weather Camp from the NOAA in Howard University. It was 2 weeks in DC. It was my first time traveling by myself. And then over there, I met 3 Puerto Ricans that were doing their grad school in atmospheric science. And then one of them gave us like a seminar about the African dust. Like they were just studying like the African dust. They were in a boat, in a ship, just traveling from Africa to the Caribbean, taking measurements.
Is that like the Saharan dust that we just had recently?
Yes, correct. That's the one. And then they introduced me with their networking. They introduced me the first meteorologist female in Puerto Rico, Ada Monzon. And then when I introduced myself to Ada Monzon, saying like, oh, I like meteorologists, but I'm going to study chemistry, she was saying like, oh, there's actually in your university a professor that does atmospheric chemistry research. And I was like, oh, that would be amazing if I can combine those 2 fields that I like. So then she told me that probably like the week before I start undergrad. And then I started looking for that person for almost over a semester. Like I was trying to look for her, like because she was not in the chemistry department as a list for for professor because she was in environmental science.
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, I don't know where is this office located. Sometimes she didn't respond my emails, or it was actually I was emailing the wrong email because they had a recent update in terms of emails. Until one day I decided with one of my friends to go to the office, and then she was at the office. And then when I kind of like did my little pitch, I did the weather camp with this professor, and I got recommended by this other person. She immediately gave me her business card and told me like, okay, or just email me and put this in the subject, just to make sure that I can that I'm going to read your email. Uh-huh. And then I had a meeting with her. She encouraged me to apply to different research programs that the university had already available for students. And basically, since my second year, I started doing research with her. And that was my niche in terms of research in atmospheric chemistry that then I even continue in grad school.
I'm so happy to hear that, you went all the way to DC to find other people like you that were doing the things that you wanted to do. How do you feel when you saw yourself represented somewhere else?
I mean, I was kind of scared at the beginning because I was not comfortable with my English. Mm-hmm. Like Spanish is my first language. It was my first time traveling by my own. Like I didn't have my parents. I didn't have anybody there. And at the beginning, I didn't know anybody that speaks Spanish. But then when we had those mentors coming to give us seminars or even like career experience on talks, by the name, the accent, and then when they were asking us questions, then we are like at the end of the meeting, like, where are you from? Like, and then I think from them, what I learned more is like the commitment to like shared information. I have this connection, I have this community, and I'm willing to share it. If you need it, you're welcome to have access to them. That's something that even to this day, like they conserve it. Like we have a group in Facebook. We met at every AMS conference. If we go, we always have like a Puerto Rican dinner during the AMS. That's the American Meteorological Society conference. Okay. And I really like that because it's such a small field for us. And there are so few opportunities within Puerto Rico that the only way that we were able to start growing is like sharing those connections and sharing those experiences and opportunities.
And it speaks so highly of the value of representation. You were this person who aspired to be a meteorologist, but wasn't really sure if she could do it. But the moment that you saw somebody who looked like you, who spoke like you, even had an accent similar to yours, you immediately felt like you could do it. And I think that is the point of being represented, of having people who look different and are from all different backgrounds be portrayed in all of these fields, because they're there, they exist. There are scientists of all backgrounds and origins, but we don't get to see them. And that makes it very hard to understand that you also can achieve that.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a little bit about the different research programs that your advisor encouraged you to apply for. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there were two research programs within the university. One was by NSF called Undergraduate Mentoring for Environmental Biology, which was more for like environmental science type of research. And then the other was from NIH, that's the MARC program, which is the Minority Access for Research Career. They were basically like research programs from the university that give you funding or a stipend monthly for doing the research. So I participate in UMEP from the NSF, and then later for the MARC. And then also both programs encourage the students to participate in summer research, which are several programs for summer research. I personally participate in the NSF called Research Experience for Undergraduate, or REUs.
Yeah.
I participate in 2 summers, one in Texas A&M in the chemistry program, and then my next internship was in the University of Colorado Boulder in the environmental engineering program.
Those were programs where you had to come to the continental USA for 3 months and do research?
Yes, those were the REUs ones.
And so how do you go about applying for a research experience for undergraduates? And how will you fund something like that, since you would have to come to the U.S. or to go to a different state? If you are in the continental U.S., you probably have to travel to another state to go to the university. So how do you do that?
To apply for the REUs, normally the process is relatively the same for every program. It consists on turning your transcript for your grades,
Okay.
a 2-letter of recommendation, and an essay for your interest. Normally, the deadlines are in January, February, because they do the decisions about March and April. And those programs, actually, you don't need to encounter any cost. Like they pay for your airfare, for your room and lodge, and also for a stipend. And sometimes, depending on the funding and the resources, they can pay you for future conference to present your research.
Wow.
And or for food. Like I remember for the Colorado, they pay for my food, and then for the Texas A&M, they pay for presenting my research in the American Chemical Society meeting.
Wow, that's a fantastic experience. How was it for you to, up until now you had been doing research, but in Puerto Rico, and I imagine probably in Spanish. So in the U.S., that probably wasn't the case. What was it like?
Yeah, so the first, I was a little bit like nervous about it, but at the same time, I knew that in order to have better opportunities to grow my career, I wanted to come to the United States for grad school. Mm-hmm. So I knew that I wanted to do my PhD, and I wanted to do it in United States because of the opportunities. But at the same time, like I was just all the time living with my parents, even during my undergrad. So I needed that test to see how well can I take care basically of myself, or how long, like managing my finance, like my decisions, and I'm basically testing like the environment, like how comfortable I will be with meeting people from different areas, from different cultures and perspectives. How can I work with them? Like, what's the commitment in terms of the science? Like, what is the expectation? Meeting with other grad students to see their perspective, like what has been their experience. Mm-hmm. And that was basically my initial motivation. Then I carefully decided I wanted to continue in the atmospheric chemistry area, but I wanted to explore different areas. So I was doing in Puerto Rico just like chemical analysis and of particles, like mainly like solid. And then when I went to Texas A&M, I was doing more study for gas phase, more like physical chemistry. Mm-hmm. And then when I went to the Colorado, was more in the biological aspect. Technically, it's really helpful, that knowledge for right now with the COVID situation.
That's awesome.
And basically just having that comparison or just that experience, because I was a little bit afraid of going out and going to a completely new type of research. If I needed to start everything from scratch in another language without knowing the background or the context, I was a little bit afraid. I tried to do a different aspect from the atmospheric chemistry perspective. So in case if I found another niche, and then I decided to do my grad school research in another areas.
I think what you're saying is really important, because people are often encouraged to try new things and to change things. But sometimes when you change everything at the same time, it could be a recipe for disaster. If you change your environment and your language and also the knowledge that you have, it's going to be much harder to be successful in that new environment. But if you take one of the things that you know is familiar to you and and then you keep that the same, and then you change a couple other things, then it makes the change a little bit more manageable. And also it helps you not be afraid of change, because you know that even though things are changing, you start developing strategies to sort of adapt to the situation and be comfortable eventually with change.
Correct.
And so I can imagine, you use this experience to try new things, which is great. Even within your own research field, you still explored. You still try to find different areas that you could learn about to see what really was your vocation. And that's one of the things that our previous guest actually also encourages, is to just try as many things as possible, because that's the only way you're going to be able to learn what you like.
Exactly. I mean, if you have more exposure, basically that will solidify the area that you actually like, because sometimes you say that you like something, but it's because that's the only thing that you have been exposed. When you have been exposed to several other fields, then that makes your decision and your passion about that topic even harder, and then your commitment is even more.
Yes, I agree. And so one of the things that must have been different, I know from, knowing you from before this interview, that the resources at the University of Puerto Rico were a lot less than what you could find in your research experiences in Texas A&M or the University of Colorado. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, a great example that I always gave is that I remember when I was, because in the atmospheric chemistry field, a lot of time is planning, because you need to do like a field campaign, and it's in a particular time frame, and you need to have everything ordered on time. So I remember that I needed to order 2 months in advance. Wow. The reactants. Like I remember I prepared a work order for 2 bottles of acetone, like 2 months before what I needed. And then when I went to Texas A&M for my first summer research, they were saying like, oh, we need to get dry ice, and I was like, oh, where are we going to order it? But we need to do it ahead of the time. And then they say, oh, no, we can just go to the stock room and get it. And I was like, what do you mean? And then when they showed me a stock room, I'm like, well, that means that I can come anytime and then just get acetone, like alcohol, and clean all my...
It was like going to Disneyland.
Correct. And then even when I talk with other people from Puerto Rico, a lot of them agree with that experience. Like we developed this passion of research, even during these rough conditions, you can say. Yeah. And then when we come to the United States, like we have everything like up to our hands, that makes our success or maybe our goals to make it more like faster, or even our commitment. Like I remember as an undergrad, I needed to run some analysis, and somebody needed to use the instrument, so I needed to stay overnight over there.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we only have, I remember from the organic chemists, they only have like 1 or 2 NMRs, when in Texas A&M there were like 10 of them. Yeah. So you don't need it to like book it for like a week and do all your analysis. So we developed, even as an undergrad, that commitment to the research, that then when we came here to the United States with all the facilities, that makes us like a little bit more perseverant.
And the skills, right? I think that's something to say for students who come from the University of Puerto Rico, but even immigrants who come to this country and, they take any opportunity that they can get, and they work so hard because they have been used to hardships in their own countries. Because why would you leave your country if you if it weren't for finding something better somewhere else. And so it means that you have already been through hardship. You already know what it is to work hard. So when you come to a country like the United States and you find things are a little better and a little easier for you, it really helps you thrive because you're not afraid of putting in the work. You know that you're committed to your goals, and you also have skills that you had to develop because your environment made you develop them. And that's also very sought after by companies when they want to hire people. You know, they don't want to only hire, or I think I hope anyway, that they don't want to hire people that have had everything handed to them, because that means that when they start struggling, you don't know how they're going to react because they've never struggled before.
Yeah, and then the reason for hiring a company is that know your skills as a problem solver, because also sometimes it's like, oh, I have known stories of people, it's like, oh, I don't have this React and I don't need to work today. Yes. And then somebody's like, well, I don't have React, but I do have so many other things to work on, right. Or finding a different way to do it because I still need to accomplish this. So it's that capability of like problem solving, even on the midst of discouragement or lack of resources.
With her inspiring words, we end the first part of this episode, and I encourage you to listen to the second part to learn how Dr. Wilmarie managed to apply to multiple grad schools for free, how she overcame the challenges of pursuing a PhD in a foreign language, and the opportunities that got her to represent the U.S. at one of the most influential conferences to advocate for climate change. Thank you for listening to this podcast. And if you want to put a face to the voices you just heard, you can follow us on Instagram at LatinxCan. If you have questions or feedback for us, you can email us at latinxcan@gmail.com. And if you like this episode, please leave a review. It is the quickest way to grow as a community. Once again, thank you for listening, and remember, unidos somos más.